Hello
Yeah,
and welcome to Ground Tales. This is your host Shuchita Jha, and this is the second part of the Forest Conservation Act series. Last time we discussed the amendments to the FCA, and today we will talk about the effects of these new amendments on the Forest Rights Act of 2006, which was made to undo the historical justice to the indigenous communities living in India by granting them land titles so that they can continue their lifestyles and their professions as they are. They were evicted from their lands due to several projects, and the act was made so that they could be given back what was rightfully theirs. We have with us Mr. Tushar Dash, an independent researcher working on forest rights and governance issues in India. He is associated with national initiatives of civil society organizations and bodies working with pastoral communities, working for the implementation of the Forest Rights Act. He has also conducted several training programs on FRA with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs and has served in committees and policy forums set up by the central and state governments and has written extensively on the implementation of FRA. Today, we will learn from the best. Welcome, sir. How are you?
thank. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine too. Thank you for taking out the time to meet with us.
Yeah, thank you for calling me.
Okay, so we have discussed already that the new act kind of waters down the FRA. So my very first question is, what are the major hurdles that this these new amendments will pose in the implementation of the Forest Rights Act? Because the amendments themselves do not clarify a lot of things.
Hmm. Uh, I think it's important to discuss. When we talk about what could be possible impact, it is important to first discuss. The importance of Forest Right Act as a legal mechanism to govern forest. And as when the Forest Right Act was enacted, the enactment of the law introduced a new structure of forest governance, which is a democratic forest governance. Um, and Forest Right Act has, brought in many, important provisions that establish that democratic framework of governance, Forest Right Act defines forest, and it says that forest includes all kinds of forest, including recorded forest, also including the deemed forest, unclassed forest, forest like areas. So this is very important to note as we discuss FCA amendment. um, Forest Right Act also importantly introduced the provision and idea of community forest resources, and it says that community forest resources are a new legal category of forest, defined on the basis of how communities understand all those customary forest or forest traditionally used and protected by communities, and all kind of communities, Adivasi communities and pastoral communities. All that is introduced as community forest resources. Then there are also this provision and concept of habitats, biocultural habitat rights, which include forest and all cultural, spaces which communities have used, and particularly in the case of PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And then there are landscapes which are used by pastoral communities. The reason why I am discussing all this, and sharing these provisions, because if you look at the legal concept and idea of how forest is defined, and the notion of forest in the Forest Right Act, it is very expansive, and it includes all kind of forest, and just not the recorded forest, but forest as people understand, including all biocultural forest. Now, consider that, and then consider also the fact that Forest Right Act, in its application, it applies to all this type of forest, all this diversity of forest. And in one of the estimate, as part of a study, it was found that the Forest Right Act can apply to almost like, to a minimum of 40 to 50 million of forest areas in India. So now consider that, and consider the democratic governance framework of Forest Right Act. Consider the definition of forest land and community forest resources and habitat, and consider the rights and authorities vested under Forest Right Act. And then we discuss the major amendments in the Forest Conservation Act. The first amendment says is an amendment to exclude forest area. So, I mean, if you look at the first major amendment, it says that, it's basically limits application of Forest Conservation Act to recorded forest. So all the other kind of forest that we talk about, that I mentioned just now, in the purview of which comes under Forest Right Act, can get excluded. So that is a major impact. So all these forests on which Adivasi communities live, on which they have now got legal rights, all these forests which actually come under the governance of Gram Sabhas, all these community forest resources are going to be impacted. Um, Now, one other thing is it's important to also look at is that in the current debate on how much forest can get excluded, it is said that forest outside the recorded forest area, which can be up to 20 to 25% of forest, can be impacted because of exclusion. But I would say the way the forest and forest land and forest habitat get defined in Forest Rights Act, uh, a large area, much more than 25% would get affected, and this exclusion will be huge. And this exclusion is not just going to happen in the forest areas, in Adivasi areas, but also in urban areas. Like, take a number of examples where there are already contestations going on, where between the communities, for the Adivasi communities, the forest dwelling communities, and with the state authorities, because of the fact that these forests are community forest protected and defined as community forests. Take, for example, the Orons of Rajasthan, the cultural forest of Rajasthan, the community forest of Odisha, which are also impacted due to many developmental projects. Consider the forest of Mumbai, the Ari forest, which is also recently seen a lot of conflict between communities. So this exclusion, this first set of major amendments are therefore going to exclude large forest areas, all these customary community forest areas, and therefore exclude communities and their rights.
Right. So my second question was actually on Orans only, since they are deemed forest and are now excluded from the purview of the right. So will these and community forests, will it be like more difficult to give them titles, give the pastoral communities and other Adivasi communities the titles there, because the other act doesn't bring it under its purview?
Yeah, I think there are going to be number of problems, and the actually there are already problems in areas where with in forest areas where we already see exclusion and exemptions, of various projects, and of developmental projects and industrial projects are already affecting forest rights. Now, the Forest Conservation Act amendment, by including all these exemptions and exclusion and expanding the list of exemptions, are going to further impact. I, take, I tell you one example that in many areas, these exemptions which are made, there has been this recent issue of rejection of claims. There are large scale rejection of claims which are reported from different states. Right now, the rejected claims stand at about almost about 17 lakh. in different states. Now, studies find out that many of these rejections, in fact, a large part of these rejections are reported from those forest areas which are used for extraction, where forest land diversion is proposed, where forest land diversion is already going on, and also areas which are targeted for plantations, plantation projects, campa plantation and other plantation projects. So this is already happening with the uh, rejection of mass rejection of claims, the denial of rights and exclusion has been a major concern in forest areas because of exclusion and exemptions of forest areas for diversion and extraction. Now, Forest Conservation Act amendment is going to intensify that, that impact, and then also escalate conflicts because of that.
Yeah, because the amendments do not mention, like, when, if there is a contested piece of land where the community has said that we want to bring this under our community rights, and if there is some development project that will be passed from it, so like which act will prevail? So obviously we know the obvious answer, which act will prevail. But then again,
Hmm.
those communities will not benefit, and the whole purpose of FRA then gets defeated.
Yeah, it is going to severely impact Forest Rights Act implementation. Um, it's going to lead to conflicts. Um, yeah, I mean, these are going to be major impacts.
Right. There's another amendment that speaks about exempting 100 square kilometer area near the borders, near the international borders. So, what does this mean for the northeastern states, which are basically, which have community forests, and they lie like, so they share boundaries with Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. So, what is going to happen to these states, because they are pretty tiny states? They don't they're not large states like Rajasthan or UP or MP. So much of their area will come under this, right?
Yeah. Many people have already talked about, in even ecologists have also raised this issue. This is going to be a very serious problem, especially um, in the northeastern states and in the states which are bordering international border. And the fact that large forest areas are proposed to be excluded and exempted from Forest Conservation Act, that's going to create a number of problems. Like, for example, Jammu and Kashmir has a population of the tribal communities and many pastoral communities. All the forest land they use, and on which now they are claiming rights. They are going to the claims are going to be affected if the forest areas, if forest areas which they use for pastoral activities and other forest purposes, if they get excluded, and if all of that forest areas are going to be exempted, then that's going to create problem in Jammu and Kashmir, in northeastern state. Not just that, but there are these proposals for exemptions in the forest areas to facilitate developmental projects, as it is claimed. But this is something which is not entirely correct, because Forest Right Act already has provisions for developmental facilities. So if developmental facilities are to be provided in Chhattisgarh, Odisha, interior parts, and many other forest areas, then this can be provided under Forest Right Act. It is not necessary that that these forest areas have to be exempted.
Like, in your opinion, like, just as a concluding remark, what is the way forward? Like, how do we keep ensuring that forest rights, the tribal communities, the Adivasis, and all, they get what they are, what is rightfully theirs, and the although the act is going to, of course, implement it, cause implications in the uh, implementation of FRA, but is there something that can be done to ascertain that First Right Acts, has its ground and it still is not diluted? Is there something that can be done?
See, I mean, this is a larger question, uh, but the larger question is also that there is a major reversal. As I was, initially I was mentioning that Forest Right Act brought a major change in the democratic governance, and that is an important advance and advancement in forest governance, important reform in forest governance. Now, with a host of changes in the policies and new laws, Forest Conservation Act, forest conservation rules, CAMPA, and many other new, new notifications, even the green credit program implementation. It looks like India is going on a reverse direction, and that reversal is something which needs to be, needs to be raised at the highest level, highest political level, and the political authorities have to realize that if there has to be development, there has to be security, there has to be the tenure security, also livelihood security for quarter, population of India, then Forest Right Act is the only way forward. And also, if India has to realize the climate change mitigation commitments, then it has to happen through a democratic governance process. It cannot happen through processes like the Forest Conservation Act amendment or dilution of the Forest Right Act. The way forward is again to enforce Forest Right Act and to strengthen democratic governance of forest in India,
Right. So I
and
mean,
to stop reversal
sorry.
and to stop reversal.
And stop reversal, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
this is a time when the whole world is talking about how important indigenous communities are to reverse climate change. Like they represent 10% of the global population and protect more than 80% of the biodiversity. They know, they have that traditional knowledge, and the world is looking up to them, and we are actually going backwards.
Yeah. In fact, you are right. I mean, when at the international level there is recognition, increasing recognition of the importance of rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, recognition of the governance of communities, community-led governance. Um, at India level, we don't see that happening. Although Forest Conservation Act refer very strongly to the national commitments, but the national commitments are not reflected in the way amendments are proposed. And dilution of Forest Right Act is not going to help India to meet with the commitment, climate change mitigation commitments.
Right. So thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to us. It was very insightful, and just thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was Mr. Tushar Dash walking us through the implications of the new FCA amendments on FRA. Stay tuned for the next episode in the series, where we will discuss other aspects of the Act and of the amendments in greater detail. So that was Mr. Tushar Dash walking us through the implications the new FCA amendments will have on the Forest Rights Act. Stay tuned for the next episode of the series, where we will discuss the other aspects of the Act and the amendments in greater detail. Do like and share the podcast, and also subscribe to Grounded. See you next week. Bye bye.